everybody. Thanks for joining us to the March Ohio Organic Farmer Researcher Network meeting. We've been busy behind the scenes as a network with our working groups that are really forming now. So as we have interests that present themselves through our in-person workshops and discussions that we do have working groups that kind of get together on a schedule set by the farmer groups to discuss if there's a research project they want to pursue or if they just want to have a support group surrounding a topic. So just updates of some of the latest stuff for fun. We've had a mushroom working group that's been super active recently and did successfully submit a grant to explore better ways to improve mushroom production on the small scale farm in Ohio. So we're excited about that. And that group, I think, is going to continue to talk and meet and support each other and grow. And hopefully we'll have other people join. I actually had a small scale farmer reach out to me just this week that didn't know about this network, or maybe did, but not really. And with an interest, a question with mushrooms. And I'm like, oh, I have the perfect connection for you. And those types of things make me happy. That's what this group is about, networking, right? Building community around organic practices in agriculture and supporting each other no matter where we are in the journey. So today, our presentation is one of those areas. We have Seth with us today of Charlie's Apples. And this is a project we've been following for a while, and we're excited to hear how a project went. I'm going to give Seth and Zach, his brother, major props because not only did they just complete a research project on their orchard, which has been managed organically, but they've also been asking questions since they started working the orchard to make it better and sustainable in all ways. So we celebrate the sense of wonder in this network, and Seth and his brother have that sense of wonder. So with that, Seth, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Denise. I appreciate you having me, and it's good to continue to work with you. Denise and I worked together while I was on the board of the Licking County Soil and Water Conservation District, where Denise used to work. So we've known each other for a long time. So I appreciate you inviting me here. It's just me today. My brother was not able to attend, so you get one for the price of two. But I'm happy to share kind of what our project was, how we got there, and then kind of how it went. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get rolling. Everybody seeing that okay? Great. So really our whole project was focused on investigating viable management strategies of Marssonina Leaf Blotch in organic apple production in central Ohio. So that was the impetus of the project, and that's what our focus was. Just a quick introduction of our team. It's myself. In my life outside of the orchard, I'm a full-time fundraiser for nonprofits, specifically in corporate relations. So I do that work day in, day out, work full-time off the farm in addition to the farm. And then there's my brother, Zach. He is the full-time aquatics director for the YMCA in Licking County. So he also works full-time off the farm, which is actually why he's not able to be here today. And I just like to highlight the fact that we do work full-time off the farm because we know there's always things we could be doing, more things, we could be doing things better at the farm, but we all have to be really cognizant of our time at the farm. It's a pretty heavy lift to run the orchard in addition to working full time. And then in the middle there, that's Charles Fritsch. He's the original founder of the orchard. He still lives at the orchard. We leased the land off of him, and he's still involved, not in a physical capacity, but we do still consult him when we have questions and keep them in the loop of everything that we're doing. What we're going to talk about today, our farm background and history, some of our standard disease and pest control procedures, the impact of MLB, which is a shorthand for Marssonina Leaf Blotch, so I don't have to keep saying that over and over, the research and identification that went into this project, our partnership with SARE, which is who funded the project, our solutions and our objectives, our materials, methods, and our tools, and then finally our outcomes and our recommendations to anybody who is attempting to grow either low input or fully organic apples in Ohio. So a little bit about our history. The farm was originally planted in 1995 with the intent of growing low input and high quality chemical free apples. That was kind of Charlie's vision. He's a retired engineer from Bell Labs, and it's kind of a second career for me. He's always been interested in agriculture and grew up on a tobacco farm in Kentucky. So this is right up his alley. When he was retired, he had some time to kind of dig into this a little bit more. We grow only naturally disease resistant varieties, primarily Gold Rush and Enterprise. We've added many more varieties over the last couple of years, but none of them are in full production yet. So those are our two main varieties. That picture is of an Enterprise apple there on the right. Our operation, most of our apples are sold at market directly from the farm. We have a self-service farm store. It's really low key. People just come up, take what they want out of the cooler, and leave the cash. It's all on the honor system, and it works really well for us. And people kind of feel nostalgic when they can come do that. They're like, "There's nobody here to check us out." I'm like, no, just don't steal it, please. We also offer U-Pick at the farm, where folks can come out and pick their own apples. We sell to CSAs and small grocery stores, and then we also press our own cider in addition to all of those. Couple more details on our operation. We have 1,200 trees in total across 7 acres of land. And the farm is located about 15 minutes north of Granville, Ohio, right off 661. And then we've been working the orchard, my brother and I, since 2012, and we've been leasing the orchard since 2017. Some of our standard controls include, so this is what we have been doing and we continue to do, but this is what we were doing kind of before we really saw the pressure and the impact of MLB. So our key controls include ViruSoft, which is a organic virus that we use to address Oriental fruit moth and codling moth. Really effective, almost 100% effective, that's really our biggest pest. So ViruSoft is really key to controlling that. We also use a dormant oil spray. We use a product from Drexel, but that's primarily to address plum cuculio. And then we do a lot of nutrient programs, macro and micronutrients, that we apply through foliar feed pretty much year round. We've always used sulfur in some level, but we're going to get into a little bit more about that once we move along here, because that's really what the project is focused around, is sulfur. And then obviously orchard cleanliness, making sure that everything's pruned and really well mowed and maintained, especially under the trees, because since we're not a conventional orchard, we don't spray any herbicides like a conventional orchard would under the trees to keep any foliage under the tree down. So mowing is really important. And then a really key component of our program is sap analysis, which is real-time measuring, of the levels of nutrients available to the tree at any given time. So we try to do that regularly throughout the year to make sure we know what to put on. It's pretty great. We partner with a organization called Nova Corp Labs, and they send the leaf samples off to a lab in the Tilburg, Netherlands, and they get overnighted there. They take the sap analysis and we get results back in about a week. So it's like we can apply nutrients in real time, which is very, very helpful. Orchard cleanliness, like I said, just includes mulch mowing, pruning, burning of any large branches that we have in the orchard. Really, really important just to keep the orchard clean year round. And then now we're going to get into a little bit about when we started to see what we now know is MLB. So we started seeing spots on the leaves in 2021. That picture on the left is from NC State Extension, but it's a really clear example of what MLB looks like when it's on a leaf in the orchard. And so we started to notice that in about 2021. It was probably in the orchard before that, but we hadn't identified it, or we didn't know what it was. And then in 2021 is when we really started to see impact from it. So picture on the right-hand side, we started seeing a lot of leaf loss by late summer and early fall. So you can see at the top of that tree, there's very little foliage left on the tree. This is a picture from October 14th in 2022. You can kind of see all those trees in the background pretty much completely defoliated. And this was one of those years too where we had a really, really good crop of apples, but then lost almost all the leaves. When that happens, obviously the tree can't photosynthesize and it can't really move any sugars or anything into the fruit. So basically all of the apples dropped off the trees before they were able to be harvested. We still didn't know what it was at this point, so we just started trying other things, some organic products, fungicide products, to try to see if we could control what was happening. Again, we didn't know what it was, so we were just kind of taking shots in the dark to see if we could address it in any way, and we didn't really have any improvement. And so then we really started digging into it. We consulted with OSU Extension and other orchards, including the Rodell Institute and orchards around us. It was a little bit challenging because we're the only, chemical free or organic orchard in Central Ohio. There's a couple others now throughout the state that are starting to do it, but at the time we were really the only one. So this is not a problem for a conventional grower. But then we concluded that the culprit was MLB. So now we knew what it was, and we had to try to figure out how to address it. So MLB is caused by a fungal pathogen called Marssonina coronaria. That's the pathogen that causes the leaf blotch. It infects mature leaves, and they have grayish brown lesions with purple borders, kind of like that picture we saw. And then it overwinters in leaves and causes premature defoliation. So that's why orchard cleanliness is so important to this, because you got to be able to break up those leaves that are on the ground to reduce the amount that can overwinter. And then it's also activated by warm temperatures and high humidity, typically right around the time of bloom. So at this point, by the 2022, almost all of our productive trees were losing all leaves and fruit prior to harvest, beginning in early September. So there was 2 consecutive years where it completely destroyed the viability of the orchard. And we were really kind of like, okay, we can't function. We were losing so much money year over year on the orchard that we couldn't continue to do it. We kind of talked about, well, maybe we should just go conventional for a couple of years, get it under control, and then revisit it. But we really didn't want to do that, obviously, just because it's not our main source of income, and we didn't really want to expose ourselves to some of the products that they use in conventional orchards. But it was kind of like between that or not having the orchard at all. But then we started talking to SARE, and we, based on the available information and our own experience, we began writing a treatment plan and a grant application, thinking maybe we could get some funding for this. It could cover our costs while we try to address the issue. So we wrote the grant application, we prepared it. We were lucky to get funded by SARE, which was 2 full years of funding. It covered pretty much all of our operational expenses for 2 years entirely, including, they're really great. I mean, they cover the cost of labor, all the cost of our inputs, fuel, any new equipment we needed to purchase. So we were really fortunate to be able to get this grant, and it really was a lifesaver for us. This is kind of the project overview. So first we had to segment the orchard into 4 distinct blocks so we could really measure the efficacy of what we were doing. We implemented the new treatment plan, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then we also collected detailed data on each row, block, and tree in the orchard. This is what the orchard looks like. So we segmented it into 4 blocks. Block 4, block 1, and block 2 are treatment blocks. And then block 3 serves as the control block. So we wanted to make sure we had a control block so we could test and see what we're doing to see if it was actually making a difference. And so we had something to measure it against. This is some of the equipment that we use. So we have our Ford 1520. That's our main tractor that we use for applying foliar feed or foliar sprays. And then on the right-hand side, the Ford 2000, which is what we use for almost all of our mowing. So our 2 main pieces of equipment there, in addition to the flail mower, really, really critical, like I talked about, for organic operations, to make sure you're keeping everything as clean and as clear as possible in and around the orchard. And then everything we apply is through foliar feed, and that's all driven through a roller pump sprayer attached to the other tractor. So not a whole lot of equipment needed to do this, obviously, but it is a little bit pricey stuff. And now getting into what the actual treatment plan is. So mulch mowing in the fall and winter, we were doing this beforehand, but not quite to the level that we do it now, and definitely not as much in the winter as we do now. So, at the end of season, everything's harvested, leaves are on the ground. We go through the orchard multiple times with the flail mower, which also has a mulching component to it. So it can really, really grind up anything that's on the ground and basically try to eliminate any leaf litter that's on the ground while it's still in the dormant stage. So hopefully it reduces the impact the following season. Application of Oxidate 2.0 during dormancy, which is basically like high strength hydrogen peroxide to try to break up and kill any overwintering MLB. So we apply that directly to the trees and also to the ground to try to get anything that might be hanging out there. And then the real star of the show is the intensive sulfur application at a rate of 10 pounds per acre every 7 to 10 days for 12 applications. So really, really intense applications of sulfur, a lot higher than most people would recommend. But we wanted to try it to see if it would work. And yeah, this was probably also the most expensive portion of the project. I think it was close to $3,000 just in sulfur for those 2 years. So could be cost prohibitive depending on the operation. Obviously, if it's bigger, it's going to cost a lot more, but that's really the biggest component. And then the data collection portion of it. So we created our own rating system of 1 to 4 for MLB severity in each tree. 1 being there's basically no visible signs of MLB on the tree, so leaves look good. There's not a lot of spots going on. And then 4 would be very severe, mostly defoliated, and a high presence of MLB. To collect this, we walked the orchard every 7 to 10 days and made a note of disease damage on each tree, which was pretty labor intensive. It basically was like Zach walking, me walking behind him with the iPad, and then, he calls out the level on each tree, and then I note it in the data collection. Then we also created a system for tracking the disease damage of each tree week to week. So this is what it looked like, just a snapshot of it. So each tree has a block ID, a row ID, and then a tree ID, so that we can, very clearly track the presence of MLB week to week throughout the season. So we have 2 full years of data on this now across the entire orchard for every tree, which has been really, really helpful just to see how the program is actually working. Talking about a little bit of the outcomes, it was very effective. It improved yield and crop quality, which resulted in significant increased revenue compared to pre-treatment years. So we were back into profitability just the first year after running the program, and last year, our second year, continued to be profitable and continued to improve. We also found that size and age of the tree plays a pretty large role in the effectiveness of the treatment plan. Some of that is just because younger trees are a little bit more vigorous when they're still growing, but also part of it is the way that we apply the sulfur via the foliar sprayer. It's a lot easier to get good coverage on smaller trees. So we found that to be a significant impact. And about 300 of our trees are from the original planting in 1995. So they're old in the world of trees. They're still very productive, but they're old and they're a lot taller than they probably should be. So it makes it a lot harder to get the product onto the trees. And sulfur does significantly reduce MLB, but it's not perfect, especially depending on the weather that you have. Last year we had a pretty severe drought, as I'm sure you all know, and it wasn't quite as effective in a drought year as it was in the previous year, which is really ideal growing conditions. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it's not perfect, but it does help quite a bit. And then we also tracked the difference in variety of tree and rootstock. And we found no correlation between the variety or the rootstock of the tree, which was also part of the research grant. We wanted to see if it had any difference depending on the type of tree. Some of our recommendations that we provide to other growers, or even folks that just have backyard orchards, is just definitely to incorporate sulfur and oxidate 2.0 in your disease management plans. Treatment is most effective if trees are planted in high density. We have about 250 trees that are planted this way. They're fully dwarfed trees, and they're all on trellises, and they're planted between 2 and 3 feet apart, rather than a conventional planting style, which would be like 12 feet apart. So it's most effective on trees that are planted that way, again, because they're a little bit smaller and it's much easier to get coverage. So if folks are thinking about starting an organic orchard or transitioning to an organic orchard, all of their trees would be best served planted in a high density. And then obviously ensure that the orchard is clean as possible. This might be one of the biggest things. If you can break up leaf litter and get stuff mulched and ground up in the off season, you're going to have a lot less MLB pressure. But we also think that there, at least right now, there's not going to be like a long-term cure for this, at least not what we found. It's going to be something that orchards that are doing stuff chemically free and organic are going to have to deal with continually. So we expect to continue to incorporate the intensive sulfur program and these treatment plans going forward, because we don't anticipate it ever going away. And then I just wanted to share a couple photos of what the product looks like now. So this is our most recent season. You can see the trees are foliated. The apples look really, really good. And we like to show these just because people think that you can't get, grocery store quality apples while doing things organically or chemical free, but it is possible if you just put the time and the effort into it. Um, and so I just wanted to share those photos. So they look really, really good. So overall, it was a successful project. We learned a lot. I went over that pretty quick, but I'm also happy to answer any questions you may have or get into any details. And I know you also shared the full grant report, which gets into a lot more of the technicalities of what we did. But yeah, happy to open up to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Seth. Yeah, I
Hmm.
just dropped that list or that link to the SARE report for anybody who wants to look at that now or later. And then we have a chat question about the sulfur applications. Did it shift the pH and how much?
No, it
So
did
the
not shift.
soil.
Yeah, that's a good question. It has not shifted the pH yet. That's something we're monitoring, but it takes a long. I mean, it will take a long time, I think, to really significantly shift the pH in the soil, just because it's going to be, yeah, it's a lot of sulfur for the trees, but it's a relatively small amount of sulfur for the ground. So we haven't experienced that yet in the 2 years of doing the intensive sulfur program. We've also used sulfur in some capacities. We've used it previously to treat different types of rot on the apples. So we've been using it in our orchard for probably 7 or 8 years, and we haven't noticed any uptick. But we're going to obviously keep monitoring that to make sure. It may be something that you can't do long term. If we start to see it drastically change too much, we'll have to adjust. But so far, no change. Good question.
Thank you for that question, Carl. And then Carl also shared a resource in the chat
Mm,
as well for everyone to know there.
yeah, not familiar with them. I'll look them up.
Other questions for Seth?
I've got a question.
Hmm.
Have you kind of experimented, or do you plan to experiment with lower levels of the sulfur to see if you get as good of results?
Um, that's a good question. Not at the moment. We don't really want to walk it back at all, because we're concerned that you have one chance in 1 year, and if it doesn't work out, then you know you're out a year. So I wouldn't think we would probably decrease it at all. If anything, we might section off another block and increase it and see if it can be even more effective if we use more of it. But it's not the most friendly thing to be spraying on your fruit for 12 weeks out of the year. But so no, not yet, but something to keep in mind.
So that control block you had, we saw the
Hmm.
pictures of with the sulfur. What did the control block look like at the end of your project?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I guess I didn't include that, but yeah, the control block started losing leaves about 4 to 5 weeks earlier than the non-control block, and did become completely defoliated, versus the treatment blocks, which had a little bit of leaf loss, but it started later and it wasn't as extreme as the control block. So we do see that there's a noticeable difference between control and non-control.
Another question in the chat: with MLB in your orchards, will your future tree plantings be different to make treatment options easier or more effective?
I don't anticipate really changing the types of the varieties that we put in, just because we have about 9 varieties total, only the two in full production, but we have about 9 varieties in total, and there wasn't any difference in how MLB impacted those. So unless um, we hear about or we find a variety that has some type of natural resistance to it, I wouldn't change anything.
You did make the change though from the original plantings to
Yeah,
the high
to
intensity.
to the high density. Yeah, that we will continue to do if we grow the orchard anymore. You know, we found that 1,200 trees it's almost too big for us to comfortably manage while still working full time. You know, it's kind of like in that in between. It's like um, it's big enough that we have to spend a ton of time on it, but it's not big enough and profitable enough yet that it's, you know, somebody could be supported full time off of it.
Looks like a follow-up question in the chat too. Have you considered or are there treatments you can apply to the detritus to reduce the fungal source? So on the ground, I'm assuming that's what.
Curious.
So did I hear that you did apply the sulfur to the ground as well?
We did not apply sulfur to the ground. No, obviously some of it gets on the ground just through foliar application, but not directly to the ground.
Other questions?
Did you,
Has anybody on the call experienced MLB other than Seth? Just curious.
Yeah, I think I've got it going on. I just learned what it was today, so this is good. Yeah.
you learned how
Yeah,
to control it too, maybe?
yeah. How many trees do you have, John?
Oh, I don't know, maybe a dozen spread around.
Okay, yeah,
Not
yeah,
not even concentrated, but yeah, for the past several years I've been getting that early leaf loss, and
yeah,
that the leaf patterns look familiar. I'm not
yeah,
I'm not high production. I usually just kind of take what I can get. So I wasn't really
yeah,
concerned, but yeah, I think I'll follow your protocol and see if it makes a difference.
yeah, yeah. Give it a try, and if you do, feel free to let us know what you see from it. If it's effective, we'd love to have some other input on that. And the product that we use, it's in the actual SARE grant report. It's called microthiol dispersed sulfur. So it's something you can order. It's the best sulfur product that we found. That it's, I mean, no sulfur is really water soluble, which can be a challenge when you're putting it on through foliar feed. But microthiol.
Oh, you froze up, but thank you.
Okay, well, hopefully Seth will unfreeze soon.
Yeah.
I think I cut out.
You can. We only
Yeah.
talked about you a little while you froze. But you were saying that the details for products used are in that full SARE report that we dropped the
Yep.
chat, the link in the chat, if anybody wanted to try that. I'll also point out that, you know, Seth mentioned that his orchard does have a self-serve stand, which also means that if you happen to be, you know, outside Granville, Ohio, and you wanted to drive past and see, you can take a look from, you know, that parking space. And Seth and Zach have always been really wonderful about sharing. So this is really like notable emerging research on an emerging problem that is real specific to the low input and organic apples that we have in Ohio, which I think we have a lot of folks that have the smaller, non-intensive, like what you mentioned, John, a few trees, but this would affect anybody's production, even if it's just for personal use.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a comment in the chat that came through is corn row crop is farmer spraying a fungal called residues, which eats up the corn stalks, wondering if there's something similar. So that idea of treating the ground. Okay.
Yeah.
Got that. And then Casey mentions that the cider is fantastic. I agree. Good stuff. So yeah, pick up some cider apples while you visit. And I'm sure too, for Seth, who's frozen again, I think, you know, he's got the guy's got have a real customer base that look forward to those, you know, low input chemical free apples. So there was like rejoice when they showed up at the market again, you know, figured out a problem and a solution to it. So the demand is there for these chemical free and low input apples. But figuring out how to manage them, especially when there's other non chemical free orchards nearby, is a real challenge. I think this is an interesting topic for this group potentially to talk about more. We haven't really had a detailed fruit growers working group, but I guarantee the fruit growers trying to do the low input and the organic are indeed all facing different challenges and talking about them, just like what John said. It's like, yeah, I've seen this thing happening with my trees, didn't know what it was until today. You know, that's why this network exists.
I wanted to ask Seth about the difference in the weather and how that impacted it, because I mean, with fungal growth, these wetter and warmer weather conditions really help spur the growth. So I think we're going to see more of this, and it's going to be harder to control. I'm still allowed to say that.
Yeah, which makes it something that we want to spread the word that MLB does exist, and we've got some good information now specific to Ohio and addressing it. And it is a, you know, a report that's out there, easy to find online, and we have people interested in sharing what they found. Seth has disappeared from our conversation right now. So we may have him back, we may not. We'll see what happens. But whether he's able to join us again or not, I don't know what happened with his internet connection. You know, those of us that have worked with him before and with Zach too, they're very, very good about sharing and curious about things, and occasionally do have field days at their farm itself. Here he comes. Trying to reconnect again. All right.
Sorry about that. I know it's done, but
That's okay. We continued
yeah, my internet completely
chatting
dropped off.
while you were gone, and something that came up it was just weather. How much MLB is helped by humid weather, wet weather, droughty weather, what's
Yeah.
known about it, either on your site or what you've learned through your research.
Yeah, we know that definitely really wet conditions and humid conditions make it much, much worse. So if you have a growing year that you're getting a lot of rain, like continually, well, even if it's not high amount of rain in terms of inches, but just a lot of water that's in the environment and it doesn't have an opportunity to dry out, that makes it much worse. So what we really want is like a lot of rain in a short period of time and then no rain for several weeks and then a lot of rain, and then so that makes it much better. And just making sure that you have really good air circulation in your orchard is important, which that's part of the mowing, and the mulch mowing is as clear as you can keep it under the tree to make sure that air is flowing and to make sure the trees are well pruned, so there's also not a lot of interior growth in the tree, because you want air to be able to move around the tree and keep things dry. And then also outside of your orchard, making sure that you don't have a lot of forest or brushy growth close to the orchard, because you want to be able to let that air move through. And there's no real research on it right now that I know of, but this is the coldest winter that we've had at our orchard in a long time. And I'll be interested to see if there's any correlation between the really, really, really cold temperatures and see if that reduces the impact of it at all. That'll be something we'll be keeping an eye on this coming year.
Yeah, interesting stuff. There was a question, Seth, if you or Zach would be at the programs coming up this Friday and Saturday, the agroforestry or the small farms conference.
I will not be. I'll still be in South Carolina through the end of the week. I don't think Zach is attending any of those, but he might be. I don't know.
So for those that are interested in this presentation that weren't able to join, if you know of someone, we are recording it and we're going to post it on the Farmer Researcher Network YouTube channel, so you can watch it again And you can also share it with folks, which is great. We appreciate that, getting the word out. Also, Seth and Zach recently presented at the OFA annual conference. So if you attended that, those recordings will be available to watch again too, for those that attended the conference. I don't know, we've got some OFA folks on right now, or we have John on right now. I don't know if you know, John, if they're out yet or when they're out. I don't know those recordings.
I think they're out.
Okay.
I saw an email earlier this week. Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Great. Thank you. Looks like Brian's asking, any thoughts on early spring flaming on the ground under the trees?
That's a good thought. We hadn't thought about doing that. There are portions, well, in some of our pollinator habitat, we do controlled burning. We've never done it in the orchard, but that's an interesting idea. So I have to think about it. It would probably help if you could do it well.
Sounds like any good project. You've got more questions and things that you can experiment with, and you'll be constantly monitoring and managing MLB.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if anybody ever wants to come see the farm or take a tour or whatever, feel free to reach out. We're happy to do that.
Thank you, Seth. You totally supported what I said while you cut out, because I talked about how you guys are wonderful about sharing. So maybe, you know, this could be something that we could talk about at a time. With the Farmer Researcher Network, we've talked about like what's next for us, what else do we want to do, and the possibility of doing partnered farm tours with OFA, who has a wonderful farm tour program put together, to be able to follow up with folks that have been generous in sharing their stories in our virtual platform, but seeing on the ground this work is always really helpful too.
Absolutely.
I think we all learn a lot when we visit each other's farms.
I'm curious what other problems you've had going organic. You know, just other transitional road bumps that you had as an orchard.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, really, like we were really cooking before we had MLB in the orchard. Everything that we were dealing with, which the big thing that I talked about earlier was the codling moth and oriental fruit moth. We have that completely controlled with the VirusOff product. We had some issues early on too with different types of rot in the apples, specifically white rot, which is just like it's actually brown, but it's called white rot, and it makes the apples just deteriorate really quickly. That's when we first started using sulfur. We were able to control that with sulfur, but there wasn't anything really going on that we weren't already able to control until the MLB, and we were still able to get really good presentable apples. So like the leaf blotch is bad. The obviously the different types of rots were a challenge, but we were able to overcome all of those. And then just getting good nutrient balances in the trees was a big hurdle, because it's not really a conventional way of thinking about apple trees. Like most people want to kind of starve them of nutrients so they don't grow a lot of brushy growth, and don't have to do as much pruning, but you also don't get as high quality fruit that way. So we were really, really all in on micro and macronutrients, and that was our big focus of trying to get really, really nutrient balanced trees. And we're still doing that, but then we had to kind of pivot to really focus on the MLB and the micronutrients and stuff. That's also can be pretty cost prohibitive. I mean, that stuff's expensive to apply. So yeah, just those things. But we were in really good shape before MLB, and now we're getting back to being in great shape again.
Awesome, thanks.
So this has been very informative. And as people have more questions, maybe after we're done here, we'll, you know, be in touch to be able to get any questions to Seth and Zach as well that we can't answer. I know I often have questions that pop into my head after a presentation, so we have that available too. Also, we have a new question. Have you seen spotted lantern fly in your orchards yet?
Not yet. We haven't seen any of it in the orchard. I've seen some in Franklin County, just like in the city on the sidewalk, but that's the only time I've seen one in Ohio so far. Hopefully we don't see them anytime soon. But yeah, that's something we're keeping an eye on because we obviously don't want them in the orchard, but nothing yet.
A good question, because the yet is probably the key
Yeah,
there. You've got them on both sides at you county-wise, and I've seen
right.
in Licking County too. Yeah. Well, great questions. And very nice presentation, Zach, too. It really, or Seth, it gave us a really good idea of MLB and both the challenges of it and potential solutions to consider. So appreciate that greatly. While we do have some time still, do we have any announcements of upcoming events or opportunities for the good of the group? We already mentioned that some of us will be at the first ever Ohio Agroforestry Summit tomorrow in Worcester, and then the Small Farm Conference the day after that on Saturday. But we do have other events coming up this spring. Our next event for the network is coming up in April. Our usual first Thursday is the 3rd of April, but we'll have Julie Dawson and talking about organic vegetable trials and a really unique and innovative project that we're excited about. So noon, normal time, we'll be doing that. And then I wanted to share that Central State's annual open house that we do on campus, where the research facility is open, the labs are open, the farm and all that to see what's going on. That is set for Friday, the 25th of April. That is a fun day, lots of opportunity, free event. When I've got a registration link, we'll send it out through this group. But we do like to show what's happening on campus for anybody that's interested in hearing more and seeing more, like really seeing more of what we're doing. Any other announcements of upcoming workshops for the group?
I'm going to mention the High Tunnel School. That is March 14th. I believe you can still sign up for it, but they're doing it in multiple locations, which is kind of cool. So you'll be able to hear all the speakers, but go someplace that's convenient for you. And it's a tri-state event. So kind of neat. I like the way they're doing it. And working groups, you know, I've enjoyed, I got the pleasure of working with the mushroom working group. And as we put together a Warner grant to look at producing on farm spawn and focusing on local and regional varieties. It's a really cool project. But yeah, if you're interested in doing a working group, this network, part of what we want to do is kind of help facilitate those groups and lift some of that burden off the farmers, you know, help take notes and call the meetings and make sure people are moving to the next step. So it did seem to help this group kind of get together. And, you know, we can also be helpful accessing resources. You know, I work at a university. I have access to some things that are a little harder to find if you're just farming or investigating on your own. So, and Denise too. So these are things that we can help with if you're interested in doing some research on your farm, or even just getting together with groups and comparing notes about what's happening on your different farms and what you've tried. So great value in that. That's all I got.
Can I share something? Sorry, I joined the meeting late. The Farmer Veteran Coalition Ohio chapter is going to be having a get together, an in-person event on March 29th in, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Pataskala, Ohio. I think that's near you, Denise. It's going to be focused on the business aspect of farming. I am going to be doing a grant writing workshop, but it's very focused on improving farmer resilience And so that's what the focus. So if you have farmer veterans in your network and they don't know about the Farmer Veteran Coalition Ohio chapter, please send them my way so that I can share with them. And I can actually, I will share information about this event with Denise, and she can send it out to everyone in the network as well.